Absolutely. I agree. I don't either. Somebody. Hey, Richard Bronson can give
That's the game. You should have been there, Ken.
Hey, how are you?
Margaret, no, she's not yet. She's no, that's for you.
Okay.
I saved it just for you. See,
Yeah, really.
I told Brandon.
Man, I'm so loved.
I told Brandon you couldn't sit there. He had to sit over there. You had to be in the middle.
That way they ask questions, hopefully they'll see Christy.
That's right.
That's what they'll ask right at it. Like, hey. So who kind of runs the deal? He does.
They did it together last time. Both Steve and the first meeting.
Okay,
Were
yeah.
you?
I think. I don't remember.
I thought you.
Yeah. I went to the game last night.
You did? I did not.
It was fun.
Were they able to play? The weather?
They were able to
It got
play.
crazy bad.
Did it? It didn't get it. My phone went off about, I don't know.
At midnight?
Yeah, it woke me up, so I sat up till 1. So, Brandon, did y'all have any games?
Not that I saw. I mean, like, now there will be some somewhere. I mean, they had a tornado go over the river, over the lake where we are, and over the yacht club in that area. And I don't know that it touched down anywhere. I turned the lights on. You could see the trees.
Really?
Y'all always do that.
It's crazy.
They do. They're kind of that area. Tuscaloosa always gets hit.
My mother's husband, I was not stepfather, my bonus dad, his husband. And they're going in there today. Just go check on them.
Yeah, they
I
should.
haven't
I knew
seen
Tuscaloosa was
pictures. I mean, I don't think it was. I think it was heavy rain for about 20 minutes. Severe wind, about what it, you know. When I left this morning, I didn't see any trees now. Where I was, but that didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Well, when I got up at midnight, that's what happened. Just like sheets of rain in Cloverdale, and then the wind started up. But it wasn't terrible. I mean, but I did get up for a second because they were like tornado warning.
The wind was worse before the storm.
I agree with
I
that.
had a lot of wind early, but I've had worse summer storms than what
I
I've
think
had.
so too. I think so too.
Now, y'all don't know, well, you might know this about me, but I'm just telling you, I have a phobia about tornadoes. You know, I'm such a control freak. That's one freaking thing you can't
I
do.
know. I'm scared of tornadoes.
I mean, I have a closet under my stairs that I empty out and get ready. I put a
Really?
pillow and a blanket and a football helmet and a flashlight.
You have a football helmet? Good for you.
And I put it in there. I need to get a bike helmet. because-
See, my phobia is what tree is going to fall on my house to cause me to have to pay for this. Or what sheet is blown off that's now leaking somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm laying there like,
Oh, I'm glad you said that. I know.
We may have some
Senator Melson may have a question.
Okay. Okay, if our oversight committee will please come to order, and we'll get moving here. Do we call a roll?
No, I got it.
I got it. Okay, we got a quorum then. So we'll get started. It's our second meeting dealing with the rescue plan funds, and I'm not sure exactly what our order of business is, but that's right. That's right. But Ken, you want to start off? Okay. Ken Boswell with ADECA.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope everybody's having fun this morning. Survived the storm well. I understand some of y'all may have some beats and bruises this morning. Oh, Lord.
They're bringing all the pain today.
Yeah, all right.
You don't feel no pain.
Hey, we're old enough to know better, right?
Right, baby.
But with 100 people in the dugout, looks like we could have won that.
I got my linebacker Chris Elliott running over here.
Mr. Chairman, let us take just a moment of your time to go over what we've been undertaking from the standpoint of broadband and the ARPA dollars that were actually sent over to ADECA. We had a total of $276 million that was awarded to ADECA. $85 million of that is for the physical recovery revenue replacement amount, and the other is for the capital projects fund of $191 million. Under the $85 million, and what we've made a conscious effort to look at in depth is to allow both to complement one another. You're not going to have a middle mile or an end mile without the middle mile. So what we're focusing on is for the first $85 million is to go for a middle mile project for the state of Alabama. With that, the recommended uses are, at this particular time, the time frame, once approved by the Digital Expansion Authority, which will meet this coming Monday at 2 o'clock. We will actually go over the plan, and once they accept it, we will finalize the grant application process April the 2022. Hold a grant application workshop and begin taking applications on May of 2022. Application submittal deadline August of 2022, and award grants September of 2022. Now, under the Capital Projects Fund, it has to be handled differently simply because this is a federal tranche of dollars. This will be, as I said earlier, be focusing on the last mile, and we actually are completing the community outreach and input requirements now. Should have that finished by July of 2022. Submit plan to Treasury August of 2022. Open grant window once Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funds become available. Now, the question of the day would be is how long will it take Treasury? We think we're ahead of the game simply because we have a state broadband plan. We want to take and approach this in a very methodical way. But if I told you that it would have a quick turnaround of 90 days, I would be absolutely giving you a falsehood. I'm giving the time frame of 6 to 12 months for Treasury to actually adopt and award our plan, but we are hoping for significant advancement in time simply because of the work that we've already done. That concludes my update. Are there any questions?
Excuse me, you're mentioning that the 191 has to go back to the Treasury for
Yes.
approval. That's because this money, that 191 capital, that money that is not what we hold. The other we hold. That's what
That is
Feds
correct.
continues to hold, and we have to submit that plan to them for approval and for dispersal. Is that accurate?
Correct, Senator.
All right. So if there's a time delay, that's not on us.
It will not be on you.
Well, I mean on Alabama. Okay.
It will not be on the state of Alabama. That is correct.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, just a couple of comments, and I'm looking at the eligibility and the ranking system on your brief here on the water
I
systems.
think
and
that's ADM.
Okay.
DECA, and that'll come.
Okay.
Director.
Sorry, I'll hold that comment. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chairman.
it, all right.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll just go on into ADM then with Mr. Lance LaFleur.
He looks anxious.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, all. Pleasure to be here with you. You have a package in front of you with ADAM on it, and we've incorporated a number of things here. It may be a little difficult for you to look at right now, but perhaps later. Briefly, The legislature appropriated $225 million of ARPA funds for the upgrade of drinking water and wastewater systems in the state of Alabama. We have approximately 1,100 public drinking water and wastewater systems in the state. We have sent out a number of emails and other correspondence to each one of them requesting that they submit whatever projects they would be interested in pursuing. We've received about 37% of those 398, this is the last count, have submitted applications. They have totaled approximately $2.8 billion worth of requests for the $225 million that's appropriated through ARPA. Fortunately, we have some other funds available coming directly from EPA, through EPA, from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The legislation that the legislature adopted broke the $225 million into three categories. $120 million for a list of systems that were identified about a year ago that were in dire need, and they will be receiving grant money for the total of the $120 million. We believe that the requests will exceed that $120 million, and they will be funded through other sources. The $100 million portion of the appropriation was designed to provide funding for other systems in need, but this group of systems, it was anticipated, would have the ability to provide matching funds. So this group of $100 million will be, depending on financial capability, providing matching funds for the ARPA funds that are available. The last $5 million was identified as for a demonstration project in the Black Belt area. The Black Belt area, as we all know, has a lot of challenges as far as wastewater disposal is concerned. And the $5 million, there is a plan in your package there. It looks like this. It's the American Rescue Plan Black Belt Wastewater Improvement Plan. It's a bit longer than people may want to read, so we provided an executive summary and a conclusion at the end. But what it does is it breaks that $5 million into two components. One for what's called a decentralized clustered system to, it's a test of a concept to bring a group of smaller homes within a 1 mile radius into a decentralized plant, obviously. The $2.2 million is to test out providing individual septic systems for homeowners that are having failing systems or running straight pipes, that sort of thing. Once both of those concepts are proved, then, pardon, sir? In Lowndes County, I'm sorry, correct. Once those concepts are proved, we will take them on in volume. Your package has a website that's dedicated to this process. It has a cover sheet that looks like this. There's a news release in there. You may be interested in which systems in your particular area have provided their funding requests to us. Once again, we have about 37% of them have submitted requests. You'll see two spreadsheets that look like this. This will identify which systems have submitted, and by no means is this going to be a complete list once the process gets going. We anticipate making distributions commitments before June 1. All funding will be on a reimbursable basis, so the funding will cover work actually done. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Representative Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I guess I'm used to asking Ken about financial questions, so.
I'll be happy to defer to him.
Yeah. So, Director, I appreciate it, and I think you've kind of touched on my areas of questions, and certainly the 37% is related to the first list that we saw, which you have updated today. And probably getting ahead of myself, but going into the next round of ARPA funds, and I'm an existing public utility in Alabama, what do I need to be doing other than the fact that if that utility has already communicated with your office and submitted engineering plans, what's next for that utility?
Well, what we are doing is we're trying to get as much of the universe in with applications in so that we will be able to prioritize those systems. We've asked them to have them in by April the 1st. If they have them in after that, they're not out of the running by any stretch. It's just the first bus will leave. The next bus will be coming shortly after that. But if you would encourage whomever is in your district, whatever utilities are in your district, encourage them to submit applications regardless of whether they think they are going to qualify. There are many benefits to that. First of all, they may qualify when they don't think they're going to qualify. And also it helps with their planning for the future and our planning for the future of the state. We are bending over backwards to try to communicate with these systems to submit their proposals. Now, we are looking at a needs-based approach. And by needs, we mean those that have physical plant needs and those that have financial needs. We will be weighing both of those in the analysis where we do our prioritization of the individual systems. We also are looking very closely at sustainability. I know that the finance director has repeatedly indicated that sustainability is an important consideration, and we wholeheartedly agree with that.
And I guess also population and economic growth that may be overwhelming their existing infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. There are a number of them that have the infrastructure needs. Once again, the drinking water and wastewater infrastructure were expanded in the 1970s with the passage of the Clean Water Act. That infrastructure is now 40 or 50 years old, and it's wearing out. And we want to have these systems upgrade, but then not get into a bind 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We want them to implement practices that will keep them in a good financial and physical plant situation from this point forward.
Very good. Thank you. I hope they're listening this morning.
Pardon?
I hope they're listening this morning. Thank you.
I hope so too. Any other questions, sir? Yes, sir.
This is still in draft form.
Yes.
Can you and I speak before it actually become your document?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do that. I see some things in there.
Absolutely. My card is in that folder. You can call me and we'll set up a time.
My second question is on the match. What is the percentage of match that we're asking these communities?
That's a good question. It will vary. The answer is if a system has very challenging financial situation, they may be required to have zero match. Others may have a limited financial capability, and there'll be a lower end match, maybe 10, 20%, 30%, on up to 100%. You know, some of these systems are very sound financially, and they have the capability to undertake the upgrades that are necessary in their system.
Are we putting this match or is that a requirement under our funds to do a match?
There's no requirement except in the statute or the allocation, the appropriation for the $225 million. It does reference a match to the degree that the system is able to provide a match.
I remember that being, and I just thought it was unfair. Here we just get free federal dollars, and we still ask the communities to match, and they really are in need of these things. But
You bring up an excellent point. We have approximately, when we add the BIL money, which is not the subject of this committee meeting, which is about $765 million, and the $225 million ARPA funds, we have roughly $1 billion, with 37% of the systems reporting in. We have requests for $2.8 billion. So we anticipate that somewhere in the range of $4, $5, or $6 billion will be requested for $1 billion availability. So our objective is to stretch those dollars as far as possible. We don't want to put anybody in a financially difficult position. But if they have the capability and still maintain their financial requirements, then we want them, and I think the legislature has expressed that they would like to have them provide part of, well, skin in the game is the term that's been used fairly often.
State can put the skin in the game, keep this money.
Yeah, the
Please
question,
call me at your convenience.
yeah, Senator Elliott.
Senator Singleton.
Yes.
That's only for part of the money. The 120 didn't have that same language in it. That was for identified need projects. The $100 million is where
Gotcha.
there was
Right.
gave the department the authority to establish a match if it was necessary. But otherwise, in your situation where there's still a needs base and don't have the financial ability, they can, like Mr. LaFleur said, to have a zero match and it'd be 100%.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
Director LaFleur, I'm encouraged to see that your needs-based approach is both needs-based on financial considerations, but also on needs based on population growth. That's important, the needs of the system and the plant to keep up with things. And I'm certainly fine in those areas that are a little bit different, that they are required to provide much more of a match, but those areas are critically important as well. Senator Albritton and I have the honor to represent Baldwin County, which saw 48% of all of the state's growth in the last year and a half was in one county. And that is putting huge burdens on our systems, as you might imagine. So while we need to catch up and subsidize some areas, there are other areas that can help themselves to some extent, but certainly need some help keeping up with the lion's share of that growth. So I'm encouraged to see needs-based is based on population growth as well.
We're using objective financial analysis so that it's based on the number. We're numbers people, and we work from physical needs of the system as well as numbers on the financial piece.
No other questions or comments. Thank you, Mr. LaFleur.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Dane Howard, do you have a report for us on the hospitals, or do you want comments?
I'll just be glad to tell you
Right.
where we are on
Okay.
everything right now. So for the $40 million, and thank you again, every hospital has a worksheet. We've developed a budget for every hospital using the $40 million based on their bed size. So every hospital now has their budget, and they have the spreadsheet for the eligible allowable expenses so that everybody is capturing their expenses in the same way to make it fair. So everyone has their spreadsheets, they're pulling their documents. Clearly, this is reimbursement for expenses that have already happened. So they've got to get together all of their documentation. We have put a deadline on ourselves to get all of the spreadsheets back in by April the 15th, yes, the tax day. The agreement with the state says that the money has to be allocated by the end of May, but we did the April 15th to help see where things are at that point, and anyone that needed any additional assistance in pulling their money together or their documents together, then they would have that time to do that so that we could make sure everything is as it should be and get the money allocated.
Senator? No.
So, the dispersal anticipated timeframe?
Well, assuming everything looks okay, when we get everything back on the 15th, if there's not anything that we got to do some sanity checks. We're hoping first part of May. We don't want to wait until the deadline to do it, but again, we gave ourselves a little bit of that time frame working with the auditors and the accounting firm to make sure before we send it out. But certainly our goal is to get it out early mid-May.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Senator Singleton.
Where are we on the $30 million for rural hospitals?
We don't administer that one. Yes.
We'll get that on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Graffin Reeves, she back? Oh, there you are. Good to see you back there. You want to let Brandon? Okay, good.
Thank you all. Ours is very similar to Dane, just in general update. A couple of dates just to keep in mind. Again, these comments are based on the most recent 40 million. We signed the MOU with Director Poole and the governor on the 8th of March. We opened a claims portal or a window for claims to begin on March 10th. That'll close the end of next week at April 8th. It's where the facilities, individual facilities, all 230 are eligible, fill out a worksheet. They go through the mitigants that are set forth, and those mitigants include any funds received on the federal level through HRSA or CMS or HHS, any additional add-ons that Medicaid provided. Once they're allocated a number or identified if they're eligible based on their expenses and based on those mitigants, then they work through the worksheet, attach some attachments that provide the documentation, again, for previous expenses made. And then the claims process begins with our third-party accounting firm. Thus far, we've had 38 facilities that have been approved through that process. They're ongoing throughout the month, totaling roughly 37.6 million. We anticipate probably another 75 to 100 buildings to apply within the next 12 days, just because that's typically how they've waited until the end to do so. At the end of the claims window on April 8th, we'll come up with an aggregate amount. That aggregate amount will be added to the deficit that was left over from the previous 40 million. We had 143 million in claims versus the 40 that was previously allocated. So this aggregate amount for November and December months will be added to the 103, and then it'll be proportionally allocated after that. And we would anticipate, last fall, I think it took us about 2 weeks from the end of the claims period to when the electronic transfers were all made. So I would say end of April, 1st of May, they would have received all funds.
Yes. All right. Thanks, Farm. Appreciate it. Director Poole, you want to wrap it up or add some more comments? Or?
I'll wrap it up.
All right, good.
So we have a handout, I think, given the structure of the meeting this morning, though, as it reaches your desk. I'm going to skip you forward to slide 6. I'm just going to talk about from a more 10,000-foot level where we are across the board in the ARPA administration from the executive side. You've heard from some of the specific entities that are administering the dollars, ADECA, ADEM, hospitals, nursing homes, so on and so forth. But I'm going to look forward to page 6. And I'm going to run through each category of appropriation that the legislature approved in the most recent allocation and tell you just kind of exactly where we are on that. I would note that as I references the various memorandums of agreement that finance has entered with the administering entities, we have copies of those MOAs here with us today. They're public documents. We'll share them with any of you at any point. Those kind of dictate those MOUs dictate the relationship between finance. Got it. That's okay. That's okay. Mine is, yeah. I have one per page, so my apologies. Yeah. But the MOUs really, or MOAs, dictate the relationship between finance and the obligations of the administering entities relative to audit trails, eligible uses, so on and so forth. So you're welcome to those. They're not particularly exciting reading, but we have them today, and we're willing to share those at any point in time. Also, as I kind of talk through the cadence and timelines of each of these, once we have signed an MOU with finance, the funds then are available to transfer to that receiving entity. In some cases, those entities, we have MOUs in place, and they've said we're ready, and we've transferred funds. In some cases, the receiving entity has not indicated to us they're ready to receive the funds. So I'm not going to talk about really where we are in the financial transfer other than to say if there's an MOU, the funds are ready to transfer as soon as that agency or entity is ready. But to move through the different appropriation categories fairly quickly, there was the $80 million for eligible health care expenses by hospitals and nursing homes. Y'all have heard from them. We have executed MOUs with both the hospitals and the nursing homes, and as you heard, they're in the process of administering those funds from a portal and an application standpoint. We had the $51 million of improvement of broadband. You've heard from ADECA today. That MOU was executed on March 22nd, so we moved quickly on that. Now, these are broken into the different categories or funding sources, so you'll see more broadband funding MOUs in a moment. The $225 million to ADEM, that MOA was signed on March 22nd as well. So, I would stop and note, The bill was signed into law in approximately mid-January, so we've been on a fast pace. I think we've made good progress on all of these. The $79.5 million to the Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund was transferred before the end of that month of bill passage on January 28th, 22, and everybody remembers there was an importance to the timing of that transfer that we were able to accomplish. Turning the page to slide 7, you'll see another $34 million from a different source of the total funding to broadband, ADECA, MOU, March 22nd. As it relates to the $5 million for telemedicine, we're receiving requests for funding for those purposes at this time, and we'll undertake a more formal review in the near future, but we need to get some of these other larger programs out the door and in process. The $36.7 million for delivery of health care, I think we've kind of referenced as a bit of a catch-all from the health care side. Mental health issues, other providers that don't fit directly within the hospital and nursing home categories. Again, we're receiving funding requests. We'll place in a review process here in short order. $30 million to assist rural hospitals. Senator Singleton, to your question, we opened the funding application portal on March 14th on that. So we're receiving that information, and that's just, we know who's eligible. We just need some information from each of them in order to release and disperse funds. We should be able to do that within the next couple weeks, but we've just got to check off our boxes. But that is well along the way, and we can provide updates at any time. The $10 million for volunteer firefighters, that funding portal opened on March 7th, will close in the coming days. Those dollars, though, are being dispersed as eligible applicants apply and meet our criterion. So we're not waiting to close the portal before disbursements, and you should be receiving updates in your emails and otherwise as it relates to those. The $10 million for emergency response providers or the rescue squads, we're going to wait and open that application portal until we've completed the volunteer firemen so we don't get all crossed up between our rescue squads and our VFDs. But that is an efficient process. We have the portal ready. It ought to operate quickly and smoothly. And finally, the $11 million for reimbursement of expenses for state inmates housed in county jails. We're reviewing the data underpinning those allocations right now. We're verifying the appropriate amounts, and we should be in a position to start dispersing that in the coming weeks as we're able to validate and confirm the underlying data set that supports the allocation. So in closing, I would note for you our website, frf.alabama.gov, or you can click through it to finance. It's very user-friendly, and you'd be surprised how much information's on it. It is updated routinely. You can go into it, see which hospitals have received how much, which VFDs have received how much, when the rural hospitals come online. So there's a lot of information through the portal. You can refer your constituents to it, your local governmental entities to it. It portals through to ADEM's documents and guidance. It portals through to ADECA. So there's a very robust and I think user-friendly website that can assist users in that regard. So we're available for questions anytime. We've come a long way, I think, in a pretty short time, but time is of the essence as it relates to the administration and disbursement of these dollars, and I certainly understand that. So,
any questions or comments from Representative Reynolds?
And just a quick comment. We received a briefing yesterday from the Veterans Administration, and certainly you've been in contact with them and communicate with them, and just want to say publicly I appreciate that. You understand their needs coming forward. Sure. The project's not even in my district, but we know the need for beds in our veterans' homes, and just appreciate that. And sure. Maybe stick that somewhere in the back of your mind as we move toward round 2.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman.
Bill, I want to thank the executive branch for all that you've done. You're right. It's been a tense and difficult time, a bureaucratic nightmare to try to put this together, to comply with the federal rules, to comply with the state timelines, and to comply with the needs of the state as we are. I compliment you on what you've done, the timelines that we've accomplished, and your availability. This last incident of the website, that's great. I appreciate everything that you've done, and all the folks here. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Director Poole? All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members of the audience or, okay. All right, done. Meeting adjourned.
I like those kind.
Well, we've been told we need to set our next meeting, so we'll hold on just a second.